Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District Board of Directors meeting for June 26, 2014. Tonight we'll have public comment followed by our annual budget hearing. People wishing to speak on something other than the budget will have 3-minute time limit. People wishing to speak on the budget will be provided that opportunity with a 3-minute limit also. We'll then deliberate and vote on the proposed budget. Then we'll go into the consent calendar, which contains minutes from 3 meetings and 5 routine business items, including renewing our police contract with the Salem Police Department, and renew our agreement with United Way for the bus passes that we donate to them each year. Approve a meeting schedule for this board for the next fiscal year. Appoint a new member to our Special Transportation Fund, and approve an amendment to our furniture purchase contract. We have 4 action items tonight, including, I guess we're going to add one here in just a minute, but we have 4 that I know of. Accepting a comprehensive service analysis report, accept the Capture the Ride final report, approve a 1-year contract with MV Transportation for our call center, approve a 3-year contract with Willamette Valley Community Health Coordinating Care Organization. And we have no information items tonight, and we'll conclude with various reports, and then we'll go into executive session to discuss the general manager's annual performance evaluation. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order, and Linda, please note the attendance. And tonight, our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Director Abbott.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we do have a new daddy here next door to me. How many times? 4th? For number 4, since our last meeting. So congratulations. Thank you. Okay, announcements and changes to the agenda.
Yes, Mr. President, I have no announcements, but one change to the agenda. We will be adding action item H.5, appointment of members to the Citizen Advisory Committee, and you should have the staff report in your packet.
Okay. So it's now time for public comments. Each person has a limit of up to 3 minutes, and as I understand it, we have no one signed up. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak? Okay. Next on the agenda is the budget hearing, and I think we'll hold that off. Our president of our budget committee hasn't arrived yet, so we might hold that off for just a little bit. Is that okay? So we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent calendar. Do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I was going to suggest pulling the discussion on the board meeting schedule.
As I talked to Ellen about that, and as the board meetings themselves are set in stone, the work sessions can be adjusted as we need to.
Because I just think it's crazy to have a work session the 8th of December and a board meeting 3 days later.
Yeah. Okay, let's pull that one. Okay, with the exception of the meeting schedule, is there any other discussion? Okay, are we ready for a vote? Okay, all those in favor of the adjusted consent calendar indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, let's deal with the issue of the schedule. Okay, do you want to address that, Marcia?
Get to the schedule. It just seemed to me, because we don't have a November meeting, we have an early work session in November, and then we have a long time, and then we have a work session on Monday and a board meeting on Thursday. And it just seems like we could have a work session someplace placed in there and not be quite so pushed in the same week. But it's just me.
And there's a couple of APTA meetings that also conflict with a couple,
In November?
no,
A work
Ours in
session,
October,
one work
yeah.
session in November.
in October and then also in March, probably. So what do you suggest, Alan?
How about if we modify the motion to approve the schedule of the regular meetings and not the work session, and we'll send out some poll to modify some of the work session dates.
Because we end up doing that anyway.
Okay, does somebody want to make that motion?
I will move that we approve the regularly scheduled board meetings calendar and leave the work session calendar to a later date.
Okay,
I second that.
okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay,
One question.
yes.
Would we still plan on having the scheduled July work session? Since that's so close.
That should be, yeah. Okay, how much longer do you want to wait for? Okay, let's see.
When I ask them, they're all-
Is Jarrett, you guys ready? I think we do the first action item and we'll come back to the budget.
Okay, our first action item tonight then is is that okay with you, Ben? Accept the comprehensive service analysis report.
Yes, thanks. Jared Chalk, our Planning and Technology Manager, will present the staff report.
Good evening, President Thompson and members of the board. I'm here today to introduce Jarrett Walker, the consultant who's been performing some analysis for us recently, and to provide us a little background on the comprehensive system analysis that is just completing now. So the issue before you today is, shall the board accept the comprehensive system analysis as presented in the attachments in your packet? And shall the board direct the general manager to bring a recommendation for implementation that includes a public outreach plan for the July board meeting? As some background, as you know, in September, the board authorized the general manager to enter into contract with Jarrett Walker and Associates for the performance of a comprehensive system analysis. This analysis included research into what individual riders are doing through a complete ride check, interviews with employees and general staff, as well as a board retreat to assess the service needs and the strategic direction in the CSA, and a well-attended stakeholder meeting to gauge community feedback on our direction. This research was used to develop an extensive and detailed existing conditions report and a series of route profiles which document the current effectiveness and the current productivity of the Chariot system. The CSA also provides recommended service changes designed to improve service efficiency, apply resources where they are most needed, and to modernize the transit system based upon current and projected conditions. The CSA contains specific short and long-range direction in terms of service expansion, equipment requirements, and future facility needs. So, staff recommends that the board accept the comprehensive system analysis as presented in the attachments, and to provide further information, I'd like to welcome Jarrett Walker to further the discussion.
Is my presentation queued up here?
Linda?
Linda?
Keep going, okay. All right,
Where's the,
missed all this cool stuff. There we go, okay. Good, thanks very much. Pleasure to be back here. We have had a wonderful time working on this project, and one of the most exciting things about it has been the involvement of the board from the very beginning, really, and the remarkable opportunities we've had to work with you throughout. Starting with a board workshop very near the beginning where we really had an opportunity to sit down and talk, I think, individually and work through some of the trade-offs that your agency will be facing. And so as important as the specific lines that we've ended up suggesting that you draw on the map are the principles, the trade-offs that we've had a chance to talk about together throughout the project, and the opportunities that you have then, I hope, to make clearer choices as you move forward. So as I think Jared listed most of the things we've done in the course of the project, these have been the major tasks. We basically proceeded through the board. The board have actually been here for many of them. The board workshop in January, the stakeholder workshop in January, which several of you attended, which really was a great opportunity to bring a larger representative sample of key interests from around your service area together, to have a chance to actually work together on thinking through what this whole task of network design is and what the choices tend to be when we sit down to work with it together. And then the direction out of that, the advice out of that, led us to go ahead and sit down with your staff and actually hammer out some specific ideas for your network, which we're here to present tonight. We talked a lot, as you'll remember in the stakeholder workshop, I put quite a bit of effort into helping people think about this question of the ridership coverage trade-off. Transit agencies are being asked to do several fundamentally contradictory things, and one of the things that's very important is that transit agencies be conscious of the extent to which they are pursuing a goal of maximum ridership. And when they do any of a number of things that pursue other goals, that they be conscious of that. One of the main concerns that we often have in the transit industry is that things that are done for a non-ridership purpose get incorrectly described as failure when they are in fact just things done for non-ridership purposes. We had this conversation about the inevitable trade-off between ridership goals, which are simply maximum ridership, and coverage goals, which tend to be all of the very important reasons why transit agencies run service that they know will be relatively low ridership. And that includes the social service needs that are present in every part of the community, even for services that not many people would ride. And it also includes the expectation of all parts of the community that there be some access. And the question, as I phrased it and as we discussed it extensively in the stakeholder workshop, was really, right now, about 65%, about 2/3 of your service is where it would be if ridership were the only goal. Would you like to turn that dial? Would you like more or less of it to be focused on a ridership outcome, understanding that as you turn the dial toward a ridership outcome, that tends to mean somewhat less of the most unproductive coverage services, and some need in particular to design those services to be more rigorously efficient in the way they provide coverage. And the answer we got from the stakeholder workshop was pretty strong, that there's comfort with turning it a little bit toward about 75, but that certainly there was not enthusiasm for going massively toward ridership in a way that would cause major losses in coverage across the low-density parts of the community. We asked a bit about what people felt was a lower limit of acceptable ridership, and we got a range of views, somewhere in the range of 5, 10, 15 boardings an hour, a level below which even coverage service is hard to justify. 5 boardings an hour is interesting. That's the lowest performance of any route in your current system. We asked about Saturday service, and this has been a very difficult conversation because I think it's understood that transit in the Salem region continues to miss a number of market opportunities by not being able to be available for people who work 5 days a week and have weekdays off. And that's many, many people in the service sector, in particular in the retail sector, where demand actually tends to peak on the weekends and you're likely to have weekdays off. And so a transit system that's not there on the weekends is not there for that. The other thing we've observed in many other cities, and I don't know that it would be that different in Salem, except to some extent the effect of government employment, is that in many cities, Saturday midday ridership is starting to reach the levels of weekday midday ridership. Obviously, the peak is a different matter. It exists only on the weekdays. But the all day, all the time pattern is starting to be very high on Saturdays, and obviously that's not something you can achieve at this point without weekend service. We asked a lot about We asked about Saturday service and talked about it, and talked a little bit about the possibility of, would you actually cut weekend service in order to fund Saturday service? There was some openness to that, but our view also is that. Going just a little bit into Saturdays, going just into Saturdays and not into Sundays, for example, going into Saturdays but not being able to be there, for example, in the evening, which is actually what a lot of Saturday demand is about, is going into the evening, probably would not get you that much and probably would not really satisfy any of the demands that are pushing you in that direction. And so I think where we're going with the plan, and I think that the position that we want to encourage you to take is that there's a great deal you can do to improve the weekday network, focused first of all on getting the structure of that network right, and then there's a separate conversation with the community about going into weekends properly with an appropriate level of service so that you can succeed. One of the other things we observed in the plan is that there really isn't very much of a conventional commute peak on your system. You look at the distribution of ridership across the day, and it's not particularly peaked at the obvious morning and afternoon times when we're used to that peaking occur. The strongest peaking in the system, the busiest hour of the day, is actually the PM school hour, and that's not all that uncommon in cities of this size, somewhat followed by the PM peak. There certainly is still a lot of state government employees riding your system, not as many as when you had the state pass. And you still see that in some morning and afternoon peaking. But what we observed in your network was that a certain amount of in the existing service pattern, there's a certain amount of service going out just for the morning and afternoon peak period, and that doesn't seem to match the pattern of demand anymore. That's actually a good thing. Running very brief periods of service is actually a relatively expensive and inefficient thing to do. You obviously have to pay somebody to come to work not very many hours. And that's less efficient than paying someone to work an 8-hour shift. So we generally suggested that we flatten out the level of service across the day, recognizing the relative flatness of the demand pattern across the day. And that's one of the ways that it's possible in the plan to afford, I think, the most exciting thing we're proposing, which is a significant expansion of the extent of high-frequency service, the kind of service where a bus is coming soon all day, and you can therefore get around the city spontaneously. We made an observation also that there's quite a bit of excessive layover time and recovery time in the current timetables, and we suggest setting that at 15% of all revenue hours. It's higher than that now. The other thing we observed is that there's currently a practice of bringing absolutely all of the buses to this location and having them sit here together for 10 minutes. And that's actually a very long time, and for people who are traveling through downtown and onward to other destinations, that's a significant source of delay. What we recommend is that it is very important for buses to meet each other. It's what's called a pulse, where all the buses are scheduled to meet each other, but that's particularly important for routes that are not very frequent, where if you miss the bus, you have a long wait. And so it's very important that those buses take care to all meet each other so that people can get off whatever bus and onto whatever other bus and not get stranded there. But now, as we're talking about introducing more high-frequency services, which are the red lines on these maps, services that come every 15 minutes all the time don't have the same need to necessarily be there with all the other buses. It's great if they are. But we have the flexibility because at any time, really, whenever you're brought to the downtown transit center, one of these buses is going to be leaving soon. They don't have to be scheduled coordinated in such a way. And so we're recommending that, in general, that these frequent routes not dwell nearly as long downtown. That has the very simple effect of speeding up a great many journeys, because these red lines, after all, these most frequent lines, are your highest demand routes. They're where the most people are traveling. And so the opportunity to get, say, from South Commercial to Keizer and to shave a lot of time off of that trip is fairly low-hanging fruit, we think, and something we recommend that you do. where there's some recommendations in the plan, I won't go much further into this now, about the need to coordinate with land use and development agencies. There are a number of situations in your city where apartments in particular and other what we might perceive to be must-serve or important to serve land uses have been built or designed in ways that's going to make transit service difficult. And there's a need for all transit agencies, and I say this to most transit agencies, to be more proactive in engaging with local land use authorities, primarily the two cities in this case, in helping to identify the simple things you can do to make those developments somewhat easier to serve. These usually do not involve anything that changes the fundamental density or character or yield of development. It's mostly just a matter of helping people be aware of certain things, certain features about the built form, about the way the streets are laid out, and so on, that can have a huge impact on whether transit is possible, is viable. So in our constrained network recommendation, which is here, and I think at this point I want to turn our attention to the map. Actually, what I'm going to do is go through a few more things and then go to the map. So in the basic idea of the network plan, what you see on the right or in the middle diagram here is the current network color-coded according to frequency. The red lines are the high-frequency services where service is always coming soon. And as you see in the existing network, you have the Lancaster Drive corridor, you have the Market and Center corridors. It's not drawn all that clear, but you do have the River Road corridor only out to downtown Keizer, not as far as the transit center because the routes diverge there. And so while there are a few red lines, they aren't actually fitting together into a network very well, and some very obvious high-demand corridors like South Commercial aren't even at high frequency. Now, I want to emphasize why high frequency is so critical. The 15-minute frequency is really when people stop feeling like they have to build their lives around a bus schedule and start feeling like service is there whenever they need it. More spontaneous kind of life becomes possible. And as a result, we tend to see 15-minute frequencies correlating with a significantly higher productivity. So this is why, given the decision to move the emphasis a little bit more toward ridership outcomes, it makes sense to get higher frequency in those corridors where you have the land use patterns, the development patterns, the demographics, the demand that indicates transit could succeed. Those factors include density, the sheer number of people around each stop and number of activities, walkability, the ability of people to walk out to stops, the linearity, the ability to run in simple straight lines like Center Street or Lancaster Road, and finally also continuity, the fact that we don't have to cross big empty gaps to get to various parts of the development. Now, one of the things that's going to come up in this plan is that as we develop this plan to shift from a somewhat more coverage-oriented network to a somewhat more ridership-oriented network, this outcome should be entirely predictable. Slightly fewer people have access to any service, but many more people have access to useful service. And while the number of people who have access to any service is often seems like it ought to be the primary thing we concern ourselves with, of course, most of the people who have access to any service, to an hourly bus, a bus making a one-way loop, something that's just not very useful, most of the people aren't using it. Whereas when we can deploy useful service, a larger share of the population tends to find it useful, which is why we tend to get these ridership outcomes. So these charts give you a basic sense of what the trade-off is likely to look like, namely that as you move from the present-day network toward the recommended network, the number of people who have access to any service goes down a little bit. But again, the service they had access to wasn't very useful, and most of them weren't using it, and we have ridership data that we've worked with very closely. I want to emphasize we've gone very closely through stop-by-stop ridership in making those estimations. And that correspondingly, the payoff is that the percentage of people who have access to high-frequency service that a lot of people would find useful, goes up. So that's the essential trade-off in that one chart. There's a very similar trade-off about jobs. Jobs with any access, most of it access that's not especially useful for those jobs, goes down a little bit. But jobs with high-frequency access goes up dramatically from about a third of the region to about half. So a huge increase in access to jobs, again constrained by the fact that we're talking about a weekday-only network, so the retail and so on jobs are at some disadvantage. So that's the recommended scenario, and at this point it's probably good to talk briefly about to the maps. The key, as we've worked through this, I want to emphasize what happened after the last process that we had with you, which was the stakeholder workshop where we worked through a lot of these ideas. We then sat down with your internal team and our consulting experts who've done this in many, many cities. We sat down with that map, which shows exactly how many people get on at every stop in the whole system. We sat down with Google Earth and your own team's intimate knowledge of the city, so that we could think of, we had the knowledge in the room about every twist and turn and about what's going on all over the city, and we worked through in very careful detail how we could take the resources of this network and deploy them in a way that would simply be liberating to a great many more people, largely by virtue of dramatically expanding the network of red lines. So whereas the network of red lines in the existing system, the high-frequency network, is very limited, as you see, in the proposed network, it gets significantly expanded with the Lancaster Drive corridor extended through, connecting to a complete new River Road corridor, so that finally River Road and Lancaster Drive come together in Keizer, connecting at high frequency, which doesn't happen now. We were able to add the South Commercial Corridor all the way down to near the south end of the city. The last available turnaround, basically, is where it ends. And we were also able to bring a basic high-frequency service to all of the high-demand parts of West Salem, which is largely Edgewater and the neighborhoods close into the south. Oh, that's helpful. That. Okay, that's good. So, so as you see, so again, the major expansions here, currently there's frequent service on Lancaster and River, but it doesn't connect frequently. You can't get every 15 minutes from here to here. That problem is fixed as these are connected through. Currently, you you do not have any frequent service in South Salem. That problem is fixed with a very simple straight south commercial route down to the last available turnaround. We've been able to create this admittedly very squiggly route in southern West Salem. It is inevitably squiggly because the streets available and the pattern of development requires twisting and turning, but it does succeed in covering all of the high demand parts of West Salem, which tend to all be south of Glen Creek Road, and do so now with very frequent service into the city. That's a huge transformation for a very, very high demand neighborhood. And one of the other things I want you to notice is that the network is getting so much simpler. This is West Salem today. The area has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different route numbers in it, but they mostly represent complex patterns of service that is almost never coming when you need it, because the green lines, which mean a bus once an hour. What we've done what we've proposed is to focus instead on the frequency, on getting a service in there that's doing a simpler pattern. There may not be a bus directly to where you're going, you may have to transfer, but on the other hand, it's coming soon all the time, all weekday. I guess I would also emphasize a few other expansions of high-frequency service. We were able to cover Brown Road with high-frequency service and, in the proposed network, unlike in the existing one, with a routing coming in here that actually comes in from the back of the community college once we have the available roads. And we've also been able to simplify a great deal the complexity of what's going on in Keizer, with, instead of this current situation with a couple of very awkward circulator routes coming out of Keizer Transit Center, we've been able to propose, first of all, this most important route, Red River Road, always doing the same thing every trip into Keizer Transit Center, and then a Cherry Avenue route which flows through to the North Keizer Loop. and which is kind of the secondary radial for Keizer, and that just leaves one little circulator, which we expect to be a very low ridership coverage service, doing the last little bit of what the 18 does today. I believe later on tonight you'll get a presentation about dial or demand responsive options for that. Is my time up? For that kind of service, and you can certainly think about that as something that is another option for that. This is a low ridership service. It's designed to be. It's one of those 25% of the budget that we've set aside for coverage services. A lot of other details in the network, I don't think I'll necessarily talk through all of the changes in detail. It's probably best if I stop at this point and let me make sure I have everything else covered in my presentation, and just stop and take questions and discussion. Thank you.
Brad?
So I'm really excited to see all of these recommendations, so thank you so much for all your work. One of the questions that I have is, do these colors represent bidirectional for each of, I know some of the routes currently are one direction, like the, up in that area.
Much of the existing system is one-way loops. The problem of one-way loop is that you can get there, but you can't get back, or at least you can't get back by the same reasonably direct path. We've tried as much as possible to make the entire system two-way. So if you see the number of little triangles here that are warning you about one-way service, a lot fewer of them over here. We still have that one-way loop on the end of State Street. We still have inevitably the one-way loop of North Keizer. This is actually a two-way loop. It goes this way and then it goes that way, so that you can ride two-way between any point on it. Other than that, the entire network is two-way.
So is the one-way a different color if it, like for example, the 18, which is the one through the L over here on the the proposed, is it?
These are the same bus. Let me clarify the colors again. As we've been talking all through the project, red means every 15, blue means every 30, green means every 60. And what happened here is, and honestly, this business of the 18, which is the L over here, is a completely detachable recommendation from the rest of the project. We can probably do whatever you prefer. Right now it is a continuous one-way loop every 30 minutes. We suggested it might be better as a two-way loop every 60 minutes. It's the same bus. It's just that instead of doing that, it would do that.
I think Steve is next here. Get your microphone, Steve.
I know what is proposed in West Salem to alleviate no coverage at all, other than Edgewater and the run out towards the apartments and the park and ride. But you don't show any solution on your map. I do know there are people that ride it because I ride it.
Okay.
And you've eliminated my ride.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your solution?
Well, when we, there are several tiers to that, several levels to that. In this exercise, we were taking a fixed budget, and we were told, take it from a budget devoted about 65% to ridership to a budget devoted about 75% to ridership. And that means that the very, very most unproductive service is going to be hard to sustain, because we're shifting the focus toward spending a little less on very low ridership services. What's happening in the hills of West Salem is that the one dot happens entirely on one trip, and it's a school trip, and it's a function of the school. And if you mentally subtract that dot to understand what's going on all day, we can count the single-digit numbers of passengers and the many stops with no passengers at all. So you can look at it by the standard of the rest of the city and notice that it is essentially except for that one dot which happens on one trip, it is the lowest ridership area of existing service. Now, and there are features of the land use pattern that make that outcome not surprising to us. So you would serve it for a coverage reason. You'd serve it for that 25% of the budget you've set aside for coverage. And when we spread that budget across the entire city in this exercise, we could not, the resources didn't get that far, given that because of the existing ridership and the land use pattern, it was essentially the lowest priority. So what can you do about that? Well, here's what we drew. We drew services that focus on where the ridership is and where the indicators of ridership potential are, which tend to be around this area, where we have some apartments and some focal points, but didn't draw service up into the hills. There are a variety of solutions that you could then bring to bear, and you may hear later tonight about flexible service opportunities. The key is if you were to decide to add a fixed route service back into here, or anything else that's essentially directly operated at the same rates at which your standard transit service is operated, that would be another bus. It would, I mean, the budget for the, that is not included in this particular in this plan at the time.
Yeah, I heard you say that earlier that if you increase coverage, then more people will use it.
No, what I said was that.
Like on commercial.
Yes, absolutely, that's true on commercial. And I was talking about increasing frequency, not coverage.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I was talking about increasing frequency. Yeah.
West Salem has had low frequency as an experience. So what that does is it discourages use by its infrequency. So you've eliminated the problem by eliminating the frequency completely. I couldn't support this unless 19% of the tax base comes from the area you've eliminated because of the value of the homes up there. And it would be really hard for us to pass any change. And I know the dynamics of the West Salem Neighborhood Association and the activity there. I think it would be, I think we need to address it somehow. And that's for another discussion.
Completely encourage you having that conversation, absolutely.
I was just curious, you said we're going to have a discussion on dial-a-ride. Will that include Cherry Lift? If not?
No, there's a Cherry Lift just was not part of this project. You will, my understanding is there's a presentation later on tonight about flexible service options for some of these same very low ridership areas. So other ways, other things you could do instead of some of these green lines. That would also be other ways of providing basic lifeline coverage to those areas where ridership expectations are always going to be low.
So is there a report of the impact to Cherry Lift under our current requirements with this plan that we're being presented tonight?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, this has no impact on Cherry Lift because our current Cherry Lift policy is to provide Cherry Lift service within the UGB. It doesn't have a 3/4 mile room. So Cherry Lift has no change with this plan.
Well, what I meant though, or could we potentially have somebody due to an existing route who, due to the location of with the bus service, they weren't calling Cherry Lift, where now that we've switched it over, they will be?
Right. It's possible. Where we have gone through and not retained an existing service, we can count the existing riders, and they are so few that the likelihood of that, I mean, will one or two people do that? Quite possibly. Will it be enough to make any significant difference in the cost of Cherry Lift? I don't believe so.
That's what I was looking for, just the impact, and you said basically you've taken that into consideration.
John?
I had a question regarding one feature of the proposed plan that we don't see on the existing one, and that is these dashed red lines for limited daily trips or express. Could you talk a little bit about that? It seems to be all going from downtown to Keizer.
Oh, I'm sorry. These are, that's just a nomenclature change. They're shown in solid pink here. I see that they're solid, shown in dashed lines here, but they haven't changed. That's just that's just a difference in the graphical style of the two maps. The routes haven't changed. Those are the 91, 92 once-a-day services that you're familiar with.
I see,
The
okay,
1X Express to Wilsonville, the 2X Express to Monmouth.
got it.
They haven't changed.
Thank you.
Marcia?
Thanks, Jared. I've been on the board so long that we've lost coverage for frequency, and then we've lost coverage for frequency, and I think this is maybe the fourth time that we've lost coverage for frequency. And so I understand Steve's concerns. I also know that historically there haven't been a lot of riders, partially due to the land, not only the land use, but the terrain in West Salem as far as riders. And I have areas where I have had acquaintances who've asked me for service, and they've never had service, and they also have very much impact on our bottom line as far as the overall. There is one part of the map that I'm a little bit concerned about, looking at the new to the old map, and that's in a dense area with smaller houses that used to have 15-minute service and now has gone to hourly service, and with this map would be 0 service. And that's the area along D Street versus the Market Street. And let me express my concern. The D Street is heavily residential, and in some areas fairly small houses and quite a few older folk. And Market Street is much more commercialized in that same area, but is not necessarily the type of commercial that people would be taking the bus to. It's, you know, it's got some engineers and some, you know, CPAs, not real high frequency commercial. And I'm just concerned that when people are living in an area that is just perfect for transit because it's designed with straight streets and flat and people can walk, that if you remove that, even if you think they at 75 can walk 4 blocks up to Market Street, they don't think they're probably going to be able to.
It depends, of course, exactly where you are in that area, whether your closest route is Market or Center. I'm glad you raised this, because D Street is almost a parable of the kind of trade-off that you have to think about when you're trying to optimize ridership. So D Street in the existing system is an hourly route, green, in between 2 15-minute routes, red. And so already, if you live there and you miss this bus, or if you live there and you want to go, never mind missing the bus, if you live there and you want to go downtown right now, chances are the fastest way to do it is not to wait 40 minutes for this bus, but to walk over here where this bus is coming every 15 minutes. That's the reality today for someone who actually just wants to get downtown or get out into Lancaster. And that's why the ridership is as it is, huge on Center and Market through this denser area, and much weaker on D Street. The other thing, as you sort of zoom back and look at the whole system, is that D Street is so close to Center. And when you're thinking about whether to serve an area, it's not just a question of what's right there, it's also a question of how efficiently are we deploying this very scarce resource. And when we have 2 routes that are that close together, yes, I'm sure there are people here who don't like to walk to there, but in the larger scheme of things, these 2 routes are mostly serving the same people. The area to which they are useful is overlapping, right? They serve an overlapping area. And because these are so close, this was, in our view, an easier thing to question than many other segments where there really aren't alternatives. And so, yes, that's why you show the deletion on D Street, because fundamentally, everyone in this area is still close to excellent service, either on Market or on Center, depending on where they are. Now, I fully understand that there are going to be some people who are going to be resistant to the walk, but what we see in ridership outcomes is that most people are walking to the more frequent service already, which is why D Street ridership is not that high. And again, we had a conversation about specifically about D Street at the stakeholder workshop. It's a very kind of classic example of the kind of situation you have to think about when you're trying to move the network toward greater ridership, if you choose to do that.
And Jared, I think one of the real concerns that I have is because some of that ridership has lost and lost and lost because they used to have 15-minute service because that was the number 2 route. I rode it lots. You couldn't get a seat part of the time until Lancaster Mall if you were on the outbound. And it was a really heavy ridership, and those people have made their investments, especially if they're, their investment in their neighborhood and their personal investment, and did ride it, and all that's happened is it's been cut and cut and cut.
It has to be understood, though, in the context of the 2 frequent routes, bracketing it, and completely understand.
Anybody else have a question? Are we ready to take a motion?
And Jerry, can I just verify that we're accepting the report? This does not mean that we're adopting the report, and that we will have lots of opportunity to talk to people about what's doing and what's happening.
And we have staff back here that's going to be taking this and digesting it and spitting it out and making sense out of it, right?
Well, and I hope that our writers are as well, because, I come from an area where we've lost service and we've lost service and we've lost service, and personally have lost service, so I can understand that.
I move that the board accept the comprehensive service analysis as presented in attachments A through G.
Second.
I also move that the board direct the general manager to bring a recommendation for implementation that includes a public outreach plan to the July board meeting.
Second that.
Okay, it's all 1 second, all one motion. Okay, did you have something else?
No, that's fine.
Okay, anyone else have any comments? Okay, we're ready for a vote. Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Jared. That is a wonderful report, and you guys did a good job, really good job. Okay, now let's bounce back to our budget hearing real quick. And, okay, this is the time on the agenda designated for a testimony by anyone on the subject of adopting the Salem Area Mass Transit District's fiscal year budget for 2014-15. That was approved by the Budget Committee on May 29th, 2014.
Thank you. Our Budget Committee Chair, Bill Holmstrom, is here to begin the public hearing and make his report.
Good evening, President Thompson, members of the board. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Bill Holmstrom. I'm the chairman of your Chariot's Salem Keizer Transit Budget Committee. I'd like to thank, first of all of you for participating and being members of the committee, as well as all the citizen members of the committee. There's 7 of us who you appoint to be your counterparts on that committee, and I appreciate all of our time and attention and effort in this process. I'd also like to thank the general manager and all his staff for putting it together, in particular Jared Isaacson, who is our financial staff person here, who's helped put a lot of this together and really walked us through it and did a great job for us, as well as all the other staff folks here, and especially Sue and some of her operations folks who come and walk us through some of the nuts and bolts, the details of the operations of the agency. You have a copy of the budget that we are recommending to you, and you have a copy of my letter that kind of outlines our recommendation to you. So I'll just speak real briefly. You, as the board and the staff at this agency, have done an excellent job over the last 2 years under very difficult circumstances, trying to keep the system running. But the problem is you don't have enough money. That really is what it comes down to. I'm glad I came after this discussion that we just had with Mr. Walker, because some of the questions that came up about, well, gosh, we're trading frequency for coverage, and we had some issues about geographic coverage in West Salem and D Street. There's also issues of temporal coverage. We don't have service on the weekend. It's huge. Service in the evenings and other parts of the day. There just isn't enough money to do everything we want to do here. You have to get more resources in order to do everything that we need to do as a community to have decent, substantial transit service. I'm not telling you anything that you guys don't already know, but I just want to be very clear and frank about my belief, and I believe the belief of the budget committee, that that's what needs to happen in order to move the agency forward. It's not a matter of waste, because you've already trimmed all that. You already have taken care of a lot of the issues that, if there was any inefficiency, you're bringing in good folks who are nationally recognized to give you even, to squeeze even more out of that rock that you so you're doing all the right things, and the things that you're lacking aren't because of the things that you're doing wrong. It's just because you don't have enough resources to do it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for a motion? Oh, yeah, true. We have, now it's time for the public comment on the budget, if there is anyone that wishes to speak. And I noticed that no one has signed up, but anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on the Salem Area Mass Transit District budget for next year? Seeing none, it's time for a motion. We'll close the public hearing first. John?
Sure. I move that the board adopt resolution number 2014-07 to adopt the fiscal year 2014 to 2015 budget, making appropriations and imposing and categorizing taxes.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Done. Okay. Our next action item will be accepting the ride.
Thank you, and Jared Chalk will come back to introduce our study group.
Good evening again, President Thompson and members of the board. It's good to speak with you. I stand before you again this evening with a different issue this time, and that is, shall the board accept Capturing the Ride's final report on flexible transit service in Keizer, West Salem, and South Salem? The report was produced by the Paradigm Planning students, and it is presented in your packet. Additionally, the question exists, shall the board direct the general manager to develop a proposal for a pilot project involving the flexible transit specified in the report? As a brief background, for the past 6 months, Salem Keizer Transit transportation development staff have been working with 6 master's students of urban and regional planning from Portland State University who have identified themselves as Paradigm Planning. We've been very pleased with their work, particularly in regards to their success in engaging the communities of Keizer, West Salem, and South Salem to talk about what those residents would prefer and look for in transit. So I would like to ask the Paradigm Planning representatives who are here today to step forward and provide a brief presentation for you. We're joined by Brenda Martin, CJ Doxey, Mike Sellinger, and Matt Bergeron. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yes. All right. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Members of the board, general manager. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present today and for having the introduction out of the way. I'll go ahead and jump right in it. I'm here today to present to you the final report of the Capturing the Ride project for the purpose of accepting and the development of a pilot project proposal. So in a brief amount of time, I'd like to summarize 5 months of research, analysis, and public outreach, and also touch on a package of recommendations that we believe will be conducive to developing a pilot project and ultimately the successful implementation of a flexible transit service in Salem and Keizer. Chariot's tasked paradigm planning to explore and recommend public transit options for low-density communities in Salem and Keizer. Currently, transit in Keizer, West Salem, South Salem are not served well by transit. And thank you. We're going to skip through. Yeah. You had quite a few after there. There we go. Perfect. So our recommendation ultimately is to implement a pilot project and flexible transit service in these areas as a way to improve accessibility. Just a brief touch on our project mission. We wanted to create greater accessibility to transit by expanding coverage with flexible transit solutions while also ensuring that populations that are transit dependent, including minorities, people with disabilities, and seniors are also accommodated in this process. So first, a quick refresher on what flexible transit is. If we think of transit as on a spectrum with fixed route being on one end and dial-a-ride service on being the other, flexible transit falls anywhere in between that as long as it combines some elements of both of those services. I trust everyone in the room is pretty familiar with either of those services, with Chariots and Chairlift, but actually talking about flexible transit bears repeating just so we all understand some of the concepts that we're talking about. So as an example, we have a regular bus route. It goes along the same route and usually stops at the same stops depending on whether riders are there or not. We introduced the concept of what's called an activated stop, which can be dispersed throughout the area. And buses will only go there when activated ahead of time by a rider. The bus will still make its regularly scheduled stops, but if we have, for example, 3 riders requesting stops at different locations, what happens is the bus, next time it comes through the route, will deviate off the route to that location and back onto it in time to reach its next stop. This is only one type of flexible transit as it happens. This is the type that paradigm planning believes is most suitable for implementing in Salem and Keizer. So about the project, the process of getting to where we are at today had 4 goals to it. From the onset of the project, we decided our most important goal was to make sure that the community had a say in how transit in their neighborhoods would look. We also wanted to set a good example and a precedent on how community engagement can work and be built off for future projects and decision-making processes. We also sought to create a comprehensive study by looking at the literature, not only looking at the literature, but also looking at what other transit agencies have done. We've reached out to multiple transit agencies across the nation and had some time to talk with them about their lessons learned and their experiences in implementing it. And we also wanted to communicate effectively. Flexible transit by itself is a little complicated to explain and a little complicated to understand at times, and we felt that was a big challenge to overcome, at least initially on. Our goal was to ensure that we explained it in a way that was accessible and informative with not being overwhelming or confusing at times. And our 4th goal in this process was to develop a replicable framework, not necessarily the most important aspect of this plan for Salem Keizer Transit, but for any other city that's interested in looking to Salem Keizer Transit as a model. We wanted them to be able to look to this and say, here's how it was done, here's how we can recreate it. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to set an example for other cities as well. We had what we looked at 4 phases. We're at the tail end of the 4th phase right now with this meeting today. I'll give an abridged version of the first 3 phases, which I consider to be very important for getting to where we're at. The first phase was to introduce ourselves to the community. It was basically going out and saying, hello, here's who we are, here's what we want to talk about. We want to come and listen to what you have to say. We gathered information in every possible way we could think of, and we wanted to get to understand what the community values were and how they used Chariot system. Our second phase is we took and built off of that and created a set of flexible transit options that would be brought back to the public to educate them on what flexible transit is, how it would work, how people would interact with it. It was a very hands-on process where we had workshops and people got to play on maps, which is a lot of fun. And we got their initial reaction with it, what their thoughts were, and we used that to enter into the third phase where we actually took all the information, built on it again, come up, design study area specific recommendations for each of those areas and brought it back out to the public and said, here's what we think, based off of what we heard, would be a good fit for your neighborhoods. And we asked them to, again, to take a look at it and see if it would work for them and see what kind of tweaks were needed for it. And finally, after considering all the community input while keeping in mind best practices and existing conditions and determining what we felt was feasible, we had a final set of recommendations, which I'll go into a little more detail than these here. The recommendations are both specific to the study areas as well as a system-wide approach that we think will be helpful in implementing flexible transit. On to the study area recommendations. We believe that each of the study areas of Keizer, West Salem, South Salem are all good candidates for a pilot project and ultimately having flexible transit services at some point. These are maps showing some of the areas where we think flexible routes would work well. The green areas and the green lines are the flexible routes, which will give greater accessibility. And Steve, I think you'd probably be happy to look at this one here. West Salem is pretty well covered, it looks like, and we wanted to make sure that we reached as much of these areas as possible, that nobody would lose coverage that already has it. And so with that, we had a couple, more than a couple, recommendations for a system as a flexible transit service. So vehicles should be minibuses. Current buses would not be able to travel down a lot of the local streets. Most agencies that do flexible transit use smaller buses, usually around 30 feet long, which can maneuver better on these smaller streets. Flexible routes recommended in this project are primarily for connecting to high-frequency routes. It would work well with what looks like a lot of Jarrett Walker's work as well, and with the high frequency being increased. Stops that connect these services are essential and should be timed well or pulsed so that there is a seamless transition created between a flexible service and a regular route. In addition, there should also be a special effort to create a safe and comfortable environment at these transfer stops. Shelters with seating, route information, and other amenities are recommended for integrating these services together. There should also be fixed stops. Flexible service is not entirely, it has elements of a fixed route service to it. Flexible transit does need some fixed stop locations, although these should be placed a little bit further apart compared to regular bus service. Wider spacing between stops will allow for greater flexibility for a bus route to deviate and pick people up upon request. Some fixed stops should have time points and other fixed stops should have time windows. Time points is it'll be here at 8:35. Time window is it'll be here between 8:30 and 8:40. It still allows that predictability where someone can show up unannounced without a reservation and reasonably expect the bus to be there and get them to their destination. Time windows will allow buses to accommodate larger volumes of activated stops on either end of reaching the next fixed stop. Which brings us to an activated stop, which is the unique feature that really turns this into flexible transit. Stops for boarding and alighting occur only after they've been activated ahead of time by a rider. Activated stops are preferable to curb-to-curb service because it will maintain some predictability and ease of use while also providing flexibility. Activated stops should also be placed strategically throughout the area. Prime locations include shopping centers, medical facilities, transit-dependent communities, and multifamily housing, among others. Once those prime locations have been determined, you can place additional stops strategically at semi-regular intervals in between those. Street network layout should also be an important consideration when designing flexible transit, just to ensure that buses are able to safely access all the points without having to backtrack or turn around. Activated bus stops will also require signage as a part of it. And it'll be necessary to indicate to riders where they can reasonably expect the bus to arrive at a certain point in time. Since there are potentially a higher number of activated stops along any flexible transit route, Paradigm Planning recommends the use of either painted sidewalks or painted curbs, as done in places like San Francisco, as a cost-saving tool to indicate to riders where to meet the bus. Activated stops, and this is only for activated stops, planning ahead will be necessary. We found that a lot of the people we talk to are okay with planning ahead 1 or 2 hours in advance for activating a stop. Riders should expect to have a 10-minute wait window for when using an activated stop, similar to fixed stops that have a time window to them. We also recommend a subscription service to reintroduce a little bit of the predictability into the flexible element. A subscription service is used for people who ride recurring schedules, commuters mainly, who can set up a subscription service without having to call and reserve a ride in advance each time. Extra charges for for the use of flexible transit is not recommended by Paradigm Planning. The purpose of flexible transit, as we see it, is to create greater transit accessibility, especially to transit-dependent riders in the areas that could potentially be seeing a reduction in service. Dispatch and technology is going to be a critical part in implementing flexible transit. Calling should be the first and initially the primary form of making reservations. Most respondents prefer to talk to a person as opposed to an automated phone system. If this were to be the case, it should be noted that calling in reservations will require additional resources at the call center from our discussions with transit operators at the bus driver focus group. Real-time bus tracking is also recommended as a way to mitigate some of the uncertainty with flexible transit in terms of its variability and going off route. Having the ability to call or text to get a time window on where the bus is to give you an idea of whether you missed it or not. Computer-aided dispatch, CAD or CAD, should also be used for route creation. It allows for quick route creation to accommodate that 1 or 2 hour advance notice. It also allows for easier communication between dispatch and bus drivers, and will also enable real-time tracking for bus services. Another critical part of flexible transit, which we feel, as we noted in one of our goals, is community outreach and education. Continuous outreach and education includes the reason and the need for flexible transit in these areas, and more importantly, how to use it. This process has already begun. We've done a series of workshops, community outreach, rolling roadshow, open houses to talk about how these would work. I feel like people are able to grasp the concept pretty easily, but as soon as it rolls out, people will need to be reminded at times. In addition, flexible transit should be distinguished as unique with a particular type of branding, but should not be, we don't recommend it as being a separate service from regular Chariot service. We think it should be a sub-brand of Chariots as it exists now, mainly because this is, as it's designed currently, is designed to support Chariots and not be a standalone service. Also, it's kind of a no-brainer, but it should go without saying. There should be easy to understand guides, pamphlets, route information, system information that explains how to use flexible transit services and how people can expect to ride on a different type of service. Transit operators, we got a chance to talk to them. It was really good feedback from them. But special training will be required for transit operators, similar to what transit operators already receive for cherry lift services. Some things that will need to be considered when educating transit riders or transit operators, excuse me, is why it's important and why it's necessary. Why are we at this point where flexible transit service is being done and not a fixed route service? Operators should also be considered as a consultant during the design and operation of these. The operators offer many years of experience, a unique perspective, and from our bus driver focus group, we've noticed there's a willingness to engage and participate in this. Finally, we have some further considerations that were a little bit outside of our purview, but largely couldn't be ignored, so we wanted to mention these as well as part of our report. One is weekend services, a common concern we hear from riders. As such, we believe this should continue to be a top priority for Salem Keizer Transit moving forward. We also have a service that will be mimicking some of the characteristics of Redline. As such, wherever flexible transit happens to be implemented, it should also take into account the Redline services that currently go on there. Lack of sidewalks and crosswalks on certain streets will also make flexible transit difficult to implement in some neighborhoods or some areas of neighborhoods, and should also be considered when designing routes. Get a little bit of boots on the street action. And finally, Salem Keizer Transit may want to consider the possibility of flagging, which is where system users can signal the bus at any point along the route to have it stop with pick or board or to pick up passengers up. However, with flagging, safety considerations will need to be investigated for that to be possible. And finally, with the pilot project, we recommend a probationary period of between 1 and 3 years. Ultimately, flexible transit, we believe, can be done in any of the 3 study areas successfully. Each study area has some strengths and weaknesses to it. Suggested modifications to the set of recommendations can also be done to offset some of the initial upfront costs. And the performance metrics for evaluating a pilot project and ultimately any flexible transit service should take into account more than a basic passenger per revenue hour. This is because the success and the purpose of flexible transit is not for high ridership, it's to expand coverage. So we'd recommend that any evaluation or performance metrics for it be both qualitative and quantitative and take into consideration feedback from the committee for implementing this. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I'd just like to say that we really appreciate all the work that you folks have put into this, and the project and the report is great. And I understand that you're a new father also.
Yes.
How did that happen? What did you have?
Well, so I'm still branded.
You are.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tragic story, which I won't go into, but he's still in the hospital right now, but he's recovering very nicely. I do have to commend my group members for this. They have been extremely supportive through these times, and then a lot of the effort, for being here is kind of an icing on the cake for me, and I'm sure it is for everyone in the group as well. So.
They filled in for you very nicely.
Yeah, actually, we kind of joked if at any of these presentations, either through the work session, which I wasn't at, or here, if our presentation was going bad, we were going to joke, oh, having a baby, got to run. So
You just advanced a little early. Yeah.
it did. I know you never, you're never certain when a baby's going to come along. So
That's true.
didn't have that one in our back pocket.
Okay, who has questions? Kate.
I have about 4. So I'm not familiar with flagging and what that entails. Is that somebody waving their hand or some other?
Basically.
Okay.
Flagging is a concept that some systems use where if you see a bus, you can just flag it and it'll pull over to a safe part of the road to pick you up. You don't have to be at a designated stop, or in this case, an activated stop for that to happen. There is some safety issues if that's an interest for Salem Keizer Transit moving forward. There has to be some research over safety because certain streets are much faster and have no places for people for bus drivers to pull over to safely pick up a passenger. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. considering that flexible transit by and large goes through suburban neighborhoods in areas that have more rural streets or more suburban streets, that's not always going to be an issue. It will be in certain cases where, and stretches of it where it connects to higher frequency routes. So there needs to be some parameters put in place where it can or can't be done, and that's where we suggest it as kind of an additional thing beyond our recommendations.
Okay, and Jerry, I have like 4 questions. So is there a current system like this already operating that we can check out online?
Yes, I can give you many. Right off the bat, actually, to keep it close to home. I know Forest Grove in Portland has just implemented a flexible transit service, so more than just looking at a website, you can make a field trip up to it and actually ride it. I haven't been to it myself. Eugene has a service as well, or they did. And then other services. I think probably the one that I always like to refer to, mainly because I live there, was Denver Regional Transit District, or RTD, has lots and lots of successful flexible services that they use. Minnesota Valley Transportation Authority, MVTA, is also a good one. Probably a very unique one, but I also thought personally that it's a good one. Where we got a lot of our inspiration for the concept of activated stops is Ben Franklin Transit up in Tri-Cities.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. So also the advance notice, and I do agree that people want to talk to a person. Do they, in any of the systems, use text or email notice also?
Yes, so we found that everyone has access to a phone. A majority of people have access to texting. Only about 35% of people said they have a smartphone with access to the internet, so we didn't feel it was important at this point in time to do something along a smartphone app, but texting is definitely something that a lot of people have access to. As far as internet connections, most people have connections to internet at their home, but not as many people have connections to internet at their work. So by and large, most people have access to a phone at some point, and we think for that reason, calling should be the primary way of making reservations initially.
The last one was just a comparison of cost per hour to operate compared to other services.
Cost, so are you asking for flexible transit services in other areas, like their costs per hour? I don't have the numbers on me. It's in one of the appendix for Appendix B, I believe. Is that what you said, Matt?
Okay.
So it'll have some numbers in there. I would not put too much into that, just because each flexible transit service is very unique to the area it serves. And I think the best rule of thumb, I think you can say in determining these performance metrics, either passengers per revenue hour or subsidy per revenue hour, is it's going to perform less than regular fixed route transit, and it's going to perform better than paratransit or dial-a-ride services. So whatever is in your area currently, you can expect that to be a good range to work from.
All right, thank you very much.
Other questions, comments?
Another question.
Okay, Brad?
It's a little bit about like the West Salem
Want me to go back to that?
or the Keizer. So to be able to implement a flex service, does it require taking a fixed route and kind of substituting the flex using the resources from the fixed route and instead reallocating it?
Yes. You'll notice that a lot of these routes, these flex route options, are very similar to existing routes already. We first looked at routes that had the lowest performing ridership as candidates for this, and we used the existing revenue hours that those routes have as a benchmark for developing our recommendations here. So each of these areas is basically taking what's there already and trying to expand the net of coverage by virtue of the low performance on it already. It's not going to be too difficult to accommodate deviations for it and potentially increase the ridership.
And along that same line, do any of these specific options most closely follow an existing route?
Yes, they all do.
I guess I ask because looking at the Keizer one, it kind of combines a few routes, so it's not so much an existing route. And I guess I'm asking partially for, I'm sure that this will probably come up with the board and later of if we're going to do a pilot, what might be the best option. And so I don't know if it's a good staff question or if it's good.
Yeah, it's, we will take the report. We may use the recommended routes. We may change it. What we'll use is their concept. We may want to take a look at the routes compared to our existing routes. And that's what we'll bring back in August. That's the recommendation, is bring back what we think should be done using their concept.
And one more thing with West Salem, if we do find that the flex route for West Salem, does that have implementations for what Jarrett Walker was recommending, which doesn't have the route, any more routes through West Salem that could be given up in exchange for a flex option?
That's correct.
It looks like a flexible route service in West Salem would synergize really well with recommendations by Jarrett Walker. So I know concerns are brought up over loss of coverage in that area. This would potentially be a way to offset some of that.
Thank you so much.
Use your microphone.
Now, is this route circular, or does it just go one way and then
In West Salem, it's two-way.
two-way? That's, yeah. Okay, and the uniqueness of West Salem is that, just a statement, it's not a question, is that people can get down to the bus, but they have to walk back up. And so flexibility in what you're proposing would eliminate a lot of reasons that people don't use the bus in West Salem, is that they have to climb a hill to get back home. Yeah, so.
And my understanding is that for certain hills, the larger regular sized buses not only aren't able to fit on it, but steeper hills, they have trouble going up it as well, whereas smaller
They used to run them on, like, through Deer Ridge.
Okay.
And I know that was a huge issue for the drivers.
Yeah.
If a car was coming, there was, somebody had to wait always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments, questions?
I would just like to comment, I think both of these programs are great, have some great thoughts in them, and I hope that our staff's going to be able to develop some utilization that'll benefit our customers.
Thank you. I think the concept of flexible transit is very exciting. In our research, we found that it's actually been around for 40 years, but that 40-year statistic is basically one place who's had it for 40 years. A majority of places that we've looked at have only been implementing these in the last 10 years, and that trend seems to be picking up slightly over time. So addressing suburban transit is a challenge, needless to say. I know you all know that, but this seems to be a potential way to overcome some of those barriers.
Okay, any other comments?
I got one more.
Okay.
Are you guys looking for jobs in the transportation industry? Maybe we'll see each other. I work as a transportation engineer for DKS Associates. I don't know if you've...
Okay. Yeah.
We can talk later and
Yeah.
be happy to put you in contact with our Portland office.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a wonderful, wonderful program you've done.
Thank you.
Are we ready for a motion?
I move the Board of Directors accept the Capturing the Ride final report produced by the Paradigm Planning Student Group as presented in Attachment A. I also move that the Board direct the General Manager to bring to the August meeting a recommendation for implementation of a pilot project using the Paradigm Planning Capturing the Ride final report.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we accept the report. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is approval of a one-year renewal of the MV Transportation Incorporated TripLink Call Center to provide that.
Thank you. So Ann Coffin, our contracted transportation manager, will present the report.
President Thompson and members of the board, it's nice to be with you this evening. We want the board to consider authorizing the general manager to enter into a one-year renewal agreement with MV Transportation to provide TripLink call center services. This would be the final renewal contract for the call center. Beginning in July of 2010, the district awarded MV Transportation a contract to operate the call center. TripLink receives reservation calls and schedules rides for Chairlift, Redline, and carts, and also the non-emergent medical transportation program. Chairlift and Redline calls are for rides booked within the urban growth boundary. Carts reservations are deviated stops covering service within Marion and Polk County. And then, of course, the non-emergent medical transportation trips and eligibility determinations are received for rides within Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. Operating information from all programs is reported monthly and annually to the National Transit Database. The original contract, which we currently operate under, provided for a 5-year term. In 2010, when MV began the contract, the anticipated calls were 13,000 per month. The last month 13,000 calls were recorded was November of 2009. Changes in eligibility due to the Affordable Care Act, calls to the TripLink call center have increased 10%. They're now receiving calls from 19,233 to 21,976 per month. The last 6 months, of course, have really increased due to the changes in the Oregon Health Plan. The need for increased staff, call center hours, have been identified, planned for, and implemented in January, which also increases some of the higher costs estimated for this year. MV has added 3 customer service representatives and a half-time scheduler to assist in answering phones and scheduling trips. The expectation from the district is that each phone station will be filled during the highest call volume hours of the day. Beginning March 1st of 2014, the TripLink call center extended their hours to include operation on Saturday from 10 to 4. Also included in this year's proposal, in order to retain employees, MV is proposing and providing a 2.5% cost of living increase to all call center employees and a one-time increase to the Chairlift scheduling position. The one-year renewal with MV Transportation to provide TripLink call center services will be effective July 1 of 2014 through June 30th of 2015. This will complete a total of 5 years contracting with MV Transportation. Staff will conduct the RFP process toward a new contract of effective July 1st of 2015. The staff recommendation to the board is to authorize the general manager to complete negotiations and enter into a one-year renewal contract not to exceed $828,000 and $828,601 with MV Transportation to provide the call center services. Can I answer any questions?
John?
I have a number of questions. Let's see here. First off, I'd like to point out that over the last several years, there have been many complaints about the call center's performance. And as I understand it, the district really has no option here. If we don't approve this contract extension for a year, we don't have a call center. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Does the contract we are being asked to authorize include any performance standards?
We have performance standards that we have been using over the last years. Right now, with our current telephone system that's new, just a few months old, we're not getting accurate numbers, but yes, we do have a set. And the performance standards are similar to national standards for call centers. Number of calls coming in, number of outbound calls, wait times, length of call.
How is the call center doing in regards to meeting those standards?
Go ahead.
Let me take, just, if I could, just, at our next work session, we have a whole presentation on what will address those issues.
Are we going to wait to approve the contract until after that, or are we being asked to approve it now?
You're being asked to approve it now.
So how are we doing in meeting those standards?
I can give you general information, Director Hamill, and that would be that we have seen a great decrease in the amount of calls and complaints about long waits. Probably in the last 4 weeks, we've made changes to the queues so that people are getting into a person sooner. We've only had one complaint, probably in the last 4 weeks, where one person had to wait over 30 minutes.
Perhaps that was me. And I'm perfectly willing to point out that it's been better in the last month or so. But we'll move on to other questions I have. The background and findings indicate that call center hours were extended in March to include Saturday availability, which I've taken advantage of a time or two. Can you explain why one cannot make chairlift appointments for Monday if he were to call in on Saturday?
Part of the reason for that is that the manifests are already set Friday night in order to get them out to the drivers so that they're ready for Monday morning. So the Saturday hours were set up so that it would take relief of all the calls and the heavy call volume on Monday, not necessarily to set rides for Monday.
It's my understanding that should Cherry Lift and possibly other of the services that use the call center, should their dispatchers need to contact the call center, their calls go through the same queues as all other incoming callers. Is this correct, even with the new phone system?
At this time, they would use the provider line to go through, is my understanding, not the general queue line.
Okay, that I think is an important improvement. Another question is that errors occur, and this is, I will direct it to you, but it's a more galaxy-wide, constellation-wide question. Errors are made when rides are scheduled, both errors by the call center operators and errors by the call center clients. Typically, these errors are not noticed until, from the perspective of our service population, the expected service fails. Could you make some comments regarding the interaction of human errors with our paratransit policy of no changes on the day of service?
I don't have good data to give you this evening to answer that fully, and I would not want to mislead you at this time, Director Hamill.
Okay. Well, my position here is that we ought to go ahead and approve this contract because we have no option. But I'd be very interested in seeing in the request for proposal for following years that we have good measures of performance. For instance, we have increased here the number of personnel assigned to the call center, but we don't have any way right now of being able to assess 3 months from now whether that was the right number or whether we still need more or whether we've gone overboard. And I think these are things that we ought to be sure we include in the next request for proposals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia?
Saran, you noted that the MV is providing a 2.5 cost of living increase to all call center employees in order to maintain employees. Can you tell me what a starting salary would be for a call center employee?
I believe it's $9.10. Okay, CSRs make $10.50 an hour to start.
Okay, it can't be 9.10 because that's lower than Oregon's minimum wage.
Other questions? Steve? Oh, go ahead, Doug. All right.
The question that I have is, in future years, when there is an option to extend a contract, would it be possible to see it soon enough to know whether we should extend or have someone else? Is that not something that's been done in the past?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
In this instance, there's not time to.
We have done
Is
it
it-
earlier in the past, and we have done it late in the past. That's
Okay.
something we're trying to correct through our procurement process.
Okay, it just makes sense that if there's going to be an option, that. Be an option. Perfect. Thank you.
I'd like to make the comment that in the public's eye, where we send our clients, the people that are receiving those clients and having to deal with the clients sitting in their offices around the city, their perception of our service is that it is abysmal. I have talked, because I provide service to my sister-in-law rather than put her on it because of her condition. I have an opportunity to sit and wait and talk to the people who deal in those offices, from my physical therapist to a dentist to the hospital to a recent ER stop that I had to make. No one has anything good to say about the call center service. That maybe it's getting better and maybe they've changed, but I sought out and I'm happy that we have somebody from the hospital on the Citizens Advisory Committee who is actively involved with improving that service. And I'm anxious to hear from her. But I am hoping that, I think the salary's too low for maintaining quality providers in the call center, personally. That's the bid that we have. That's what we have to live with now. But I think to maintain quality, long-term call center providers, it needs to be higher. If it costs us more money to do that, I think the public deserves it. That's my comment.
Thank you, Director Evans.
Other comments, questions? Let her off the stand. Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Directors authorize the general manager to exercise a one-year renewal, July 1 through 2014 through June 30, 2015. Contract not to exceed $828,601 with MV Transport to provide TripLink call center services.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, very good, thank you. Our next issue is approval of a 3-year contract for Willamette Valley Community Health, CCO, to provide NEMT for eligible clients, and I'll let you explain that.
I'll let Sue Ann explain that.
President Thompson and board members, again, I'm here. I'm really pleased to present this proposal to you for your approval. We've worked hard and diligently with Willamette Valley Community Health Coordinated Care Organization to get to the point where we are asking for you to authorize the general manager to enter into a 3-year contract effective July 1 of 2014 with Willamette Valley Community Health Coordinated Care Organization to provide non-emergent medical transportation for eligible clients residing in Marion and Polk counties on a cost-neutral basis. As you know, the TripLink Call Center or brokerage was established in 2003 to coordinate transportation to non-emergent medical appointments for people qualified under Medicaid or the Oregon Health Plan Plus. TripLink is one of 8 brokerages within the state of Oregon. Studies have shown that non-emergency medical transportation plays a vital role in helping clients accept health care. From the inception of the brokerage model, the purpose was, and still is, to provide rides under the least cost, most effective means. This is accomplished by providing a clearinghouse, so to speak, for clients to call, be pre-qualified, and schedule the needed medical trips. The district, via TripLink, then brokers these trips to private providers and ultimately passes these direct and indirect costs back to the state of Oregon. This partnering method lends itself positively to transit districts mandated to provide call centers for scheduling of paratransit users. The district is able to allocate costs for the TripLink call center across multiple services this way. Right now, the state of Oregon has moved forward with a new model of health care for Oregon Health Plan clients in an effort to reduce costs to Medicaid programs. This model focuses on preventative health care. Coordinated care organizations are provided a global budget in which to provide physical, mental, and dental health care for Oregon Health Plan clients. Included in the global budget is funding for non-emergent medical transportation, or NEMT. Service provided through TripLink Call Center for the Willamette Valley Community Health Coordinated Care Organization will include screening, scheduling, billing, and providing rides for eligible clients for non-emergent medical transportation. Contracting with private providers of transportation services in the CCO's region. Collaborating with CCO on best practices and knowledge sharing for cost effectiveness. The contracting methodology will be based on a trip rate of $37.56 per trip. The per trip rate will be defined as a one-way trip to or from a medical, dental, or behavioral health practitioner for a covered service. A single visit to and from a covered service will be billed as 2 units or 2 trips. This rate includes all direct and indirect costs incurred by the district. The district and Willamette Valley Community Health will meet at least quarterly for the purpose of evaluating the compensation for a focus on service delivery model. The district will be compensated for demonstrated actual costs on a quarterly reconciliation. Moving forward, continuing to provide non-emergent medical transportation in Marion and Polk counties in partnership with Willamette Valley Community Health is in line with our district's goal of developing community partnerships. Staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to enter into a 3-year contract effective July 1 of 2014 with Willamette Valley Community Health to provide non-emergent medical transportation in Marion and Polk counties. Can I answer any questions?
We don't have the contract in front of us, and I know that it's really complicated. I assume that the contract has been approved prior to our approval by our legal counsel.
Yes, it has.
Just wanted to clarify that we just don't go bounding into contracts without checking in.
How thick is it?
I'm not sure, Ben.
Roughly half an inch.
Oh, that's not bad. Anyone else have a question or comment? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
I move the board authorize the general manager to enter into a 3-year contract effective July 1st, 2014 with Willamette Valley Community Health to provide non-emergency medical transportation in Marion and Polk counties.
Second?
moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
This is a long time coming as far as culmination of ways of treating medical issues in the state. I remember sitting in hearing rooms in 2003 and 2005 when the overhaul of the way we provide health service in Oregon was being discussed. 4 days a week or 3 days a week for 3 hours on a wooden chair. But I think it's really going to provide benefits not only for the increased numbers of people who are able under the Affordable Care Act to get onto the Oregon Health Plan, but in the long run it will save all of us, because when people are not covered by health insurance, they experience trips to the hospital using emergency rooms, which is often the most expensive. They don't go to the doctor, and so by the time they get taken care of, it's more expensive. And that's built into what we as individuals and we as organizations pay in our health insurance rates, because otherwise the service wouldn't be there. And so I think that this is really good that we're able to do that. I'm really glad that I could make the motion to do it, but it's a long time coming, but I think as we continue on, we'll find that we're going to be leading the charge again in Oregon on health care.
I just want to thank the folks that put this together and negotiated this, because I know that it took some work, and I was really concerned that something would go wrong or be different. And I'm really happy with that we have this contract and agreement.
I concur. This was a big job that had to be completed under a lot of time pressure, and it looks great.
You could pass that thanks along to Sue Ann Coffin and Sue Dreyer.
And Jean Schaefer.
Gene Schaefer, okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you, guys. Anyway, let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we made it. The last agenda item is the one that we added, and that's the appointment of members to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Right, thank you. And Sadie Carney, our Community Relations Officer, will present the staff report.
Good evening, President Thompson, members of the board. I am before you again to talk about citizen appointments to our CAC. We had one member who had some work conflicts and had to resign her position representing the Chamber of Commerce. Fortunately, the Chamber had another candidate in mind, and after speaking with her, she is delighted to join the group. In the past month, we were also able to locate a student member, a senior or a young man that is beginning his senior year this coming fall from McKay High School, Manuel Marcos, and representing the Chamber of Commerce is Morgan Sund, who works with Chamberlain Financial Services. So they will begin with the new members at the upcoming CAC meeting, which is scheduled for the 9th of July. And we're happy to have the whole group together again and beginning to meet on a regular basis. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Go ahead.
Hey, I see you also were able to get a member to fill the minority slot, which was still vacant last time we talked about.
Yes, Oscar Porras from MAPS Credit Union. He is their community outreach coordinator, I believe is his title. I think he's going to do a great job. We've had a good conversation, and he's happy to be there.
The roster looks great.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the group.
Other comments?
Just one. I had a chance to do the luncheon with the folks that are coming on board, and I'm really excited about the breadth of experience and knowledge that's coming onto the committee. So you did a great job of getting good people. Thank you.
Marcia?
Do we still have an arrangement with the school district for McKay High School where we have bus routes that serve, so they don't have to have as many school buses? Because I know that we had that for a long time.
11 just goes by there.
I don't think anything above what we already provide.
Well, it wasn't providing extra routes, it was providing actual just bus passes, because we had routes and we used to do that, and it would just be interesting, but it's nice to know, because I know that McKay High School has lots and lots of students who utilize the fixed route service, because sometimes they're overflowing when you go by the
Manuel himself is a very consistent rider.
very good.
Good input there.
So it took a little bit of effort, but you got it done before the beginning, so.
We did.
No, they used to have to put extra buses on once in a while to cover that, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Let's go ahead.
I was just curious if the board's aware of the new meeting times that the Citizen Advisory Committee is going to be having. Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30, the second Wednesday of every other month. So, which I think is great, by the way. It's nice to have it at the end of the workday so that it doesn't eat up another evening. So
Took kind of an informal poll of incoming members and existing members electronically, and that seemed to be a date that would work well for most people. So I'm glad it worked out that way myself.
I wish I could have been there to the luncheon. I was in the hospital. Actually, I'm on my way home from the hospital with the new
Bigger
baby.
needs to attend to that day.
Okay, are we ready for a motion?
I can make it. I move that the board approve the citizen appointments to the vacant positions on the Citizen Advisory Committee as shown in Attachment B, effective June 26th, 2014.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right, no information items tonight and reports, board subcommittee reports, and we'll start off with the Council of Government meeting. I've had 3 meetings in the Council of Governments in the last couple of weeks, and I sat on the Council of Governments Budget Committee, which we passed the budget on to the regular membership. Another meeting that I had over there was Council of Governments Executive Committee, where we approved the agenda for the next meeting. And then we actually had the next meeting. So we approved the budget, and we listened to a really interesting presentation by a lady from Independence that talked about services and governments in the Latino community. It was really interesting. It featured this, she was an intern for a year in Independence. And she told about the work that she did during that year. We also congratulated Independence for winning the All-American City Award, which is quite an achievement. 10 out of the country get that award each year. And we also approved the executive director's request to go half-time and hire a deputy director to cover the other half. So it was a busy, busy time. Let's see what's next on the agenda here. Why don't we go to Bob and have him tell about his stuff here?
Okay. Better see. Basically, my report is on the SCATS meetings. I sent out a report on the earlier SCATS meeting, but I had 2 this month, just the way they fell. But I went to SCATS on Tuesday, and basically, at the last meeting, we had the presentation of the SCATS Transportation Improvement Program and Air Quality Conformity Determination, and that was approved by the SCATS Committee for the next period of fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 20. We also approved the regional architecture plan update of the project list, which are the projects that are in the line for being funded and completed, and that was approved. We had a very good presentation by Roxanne Rolls on the rideshare program and transportation demand management. And one of the things we're doing is the LCDC has been taking a look at the transportation planning rule, and they are we're attempting to change how plans were adopted and pushing them back so the local entities had to approve all the plans rather than the Council of Governments. And so SCAT sent a letter requesting that be reviewed, and there's just some problems when it goes the other way because some of these small entities don't have the staff to deal with that, and the Council of Governments is representing all of these agencies anyway, so they're contributing through the council. And then we had some minor issues that were just discussed and nothing serious. I also attended this afternoon, I attended the Salem River Crossing Task Force meeting, and basically we discussed three things. One was the design of the bridge, and the other was how we're going to fund it. And so sometime in the fall, they're going to have a workshop to work on how we fund the bridge. And I did make a statement that I hope they would not use property taxes to fund the bridge, that they would use motor vehicle fees, because some of us that only own one automobile hate to pay high property taxes to subsidize other people's driving habits. So.
Thank you, Bob. I skipped over a couple here. Special Transportation Advisory Committee didn't meet. It meets quarterly now. However, we did have one of the two regional meetings that we have quarterly also, and this was in the Marion County one. And we had a good attendance in Humsville, and had a rousing meeting talking about all the statistics and how things are going in carts. So, and Director Kelly, how about Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation?
We meet the first Thursday of, usually it's every other month, and we had a discussion and a presentation by Hal Gard, who's the Rail and Transit Administrator for ODOT, and then we had probably a 45-minute conversation. ODOT Director Garrett requested time on our agenda to come and just chat with us and thank us for going to the commission meeting in February and having about an hour conversation back and forth with the Oregon Transportation Commission. He updated us because they have some new members, and thanked us and all the other area commissions for our time, and discussed the funding issues via the federal government and the uncertainty of funding for transportation projects, all transportation projects on the federal level, and then the concerns about the highway projects for the Oregon fuel tax, because virtually almost all of the gasoline taxes in the state are limited to highway and very strictly limited to highway funding. And was pretty upfront about where the state would be for trying to provide funding for a third bridge in Salem. So it was a very, very good discussion. And we also had a sort of overview of what projects were going to be going to from the all-region meeting to the all-state meeting for Connect Oregon grants, for the grants that would be approved through that process. While we had our project sort of at least in the running, I don't believe it got funded at the full grant, and so we need to do a little bit of work in order to keep our level of visibility up versus Lane County, I think I would say it politely. So we at least gotten some funding through some other sources for the courthouse square remediation, but we do need to make sure that we can do a little bit better on being more pushy.
And
We're pushy enough on our level. We were well supported by all of our area commission, and we made it through the all region. It was Lane County got more projects in, and I think that maybe we need to work with some of our chamber and some other selected people to do a little bit more schmoozing if we want to get some money.
thank you. And Citizen Advisory Committee, I think we've already had that report, basically. We haven't met yet, and we'll have a nice report next month. Yeah. Okay, let's go to board and management issues, unless somebody has anything else to add on reports. Board and management issues, General Manager.
Okay, great, thank you. I have a few items to report. First, good news about the State Fair, and I'll ask Steve Dickey to make that report.
Well, for the first time in several years, we have been once again approached by the State Fair to request that we would provide shuttle service during the fair to help with alleviating parking concerns and assist with better transit service. For those who may not be familiar, during the fair, because of the traffic and access to and from our routes that normally travel right next to and have stops adjacent to the state fairgrounds, actually operating on a detour because we're unable to operate along those routes and maintain our schedules. So in the past, we have been able to do this until FTA changed rules in regard to charter limitations. And in that process, you have to give first opportunity to all charter operators in the area to provide that service. We went through the process as prescribed by the Federal Transit Administration, provided the opportunity for charter operators to bid on the project. Once the time had expired, the window of opportunity that is specified in the process, no charter operators had responded, and so we were then at liberty to proceed with providing information to the State Fair. We presented our proposal, which is a proposal that met their expectation, which is during the week, every 30 minutes, a bus from downtown, from the Transit Mall, and also making a stop at the Marion Parkade, and then going to the State Fair. And then on the weekends, that would be every 15 minutes that service would be in operation, and it would operate from 9 a.m. until, during the week, until 10 p.m., and then until 11, I believe it's 11 p.m. On the weekends. We presented that to them. They found the number acceptable, and so now we are proceeding with putting together details for the schedules and we will be working with them in conjunction with them to promote the availability of the shuttle for the State Fair.
It's going to be pretty much cost neutral.
Yes, cost neutral.
Okay. Marcia?
I just noticed in the newspaper that they said that they were going to, I believe, lower the price of general admission, but they were going to charge $5 for parking, so that may be good for us.
Yes, that is what we were told as well when we met with them.
Is there going to be a fare for this service, or is it a free?
There was no discussion on their part of wanting to charge a fare, so that it is to encourage people to use the bus.
Kate?
I just have a comment about the cost neutral. I think that's important for people to know. We do have a policy in place because otherwise, if we were giving shuttle service away for free, a lot of people might say, you know, we all pay our taxes and can we have free shuttle service for all of our events too? So I, also that you did go through the whole process that has to be followed before we could even get to the point of a neutral cost contract.
I'm just curious what type of bus is used, if it's going to look like a Chariot's bus. Is it just regular Chariot's bus?
Exactly like a
Yep, exactly.
Which is good, you know, publicity, get people used to using the Chariot bus. but it's not going to be confused for our typical service. It's probably on the reader board. We'll say something.
Head signs will annotate it's the fare shuttle.
And there's closer access to the fairgrounds because they'll have the stop and all of that sort of thing, correct?
Yes, the proposal is that we will be able to come in on, I believe it's, I don't remember the name of the street now, I believe it's Woodrow, and come down to 17th and make a stop right there by one of the main gates going in from 17th and then proceed on from there.
Go down to Silverton Road.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Yes, okay. Also, in your packets, and it was emailed to you, we received a Dear Colleague letter earlier this week from Secretary of Transportation Fox, having to do with the impending doom of the Highway Trust Fund. He had previously sent out to states, but now that, as you know, the mass transit account is a portion of the Highway Trust Fund, and now the potential end of that is insolvency is coming. So in the letter, it talks about the highway account for the Highway Trust Fund may face insolvency as soon as August if nothing happens in Congress, and the mass transit account facing insolvency before the end of December. So they're putting us on notice that if nothing happens and they start to drop below, I think it's $4 billion threshold for highway and $2 billion for transit, they will start delaying reimbursements owed to agencies. So what does that mean to us? I think in the short term, there's no impact. If for some reason something doesn't happen this summer, as it gets closer to December, there's a potential for us to receive reimbursements for our federal funds. We have the finance department now looking at our cash flow to see if there's any concern now to ensure we have sufficient cash flow to get us through November's property tax receipts. He did not believe so on the surface, but we're doing a double check just to make sure. The concern for us, for capital projects, not so much. We can stop a capital project, but we rely on federal funds for operations, so we want to make sure that we don't catch ourselves short, and if so, then we'll bring back actions that we need to take just in case, but I think we're okay. I would also note that at next month's board meeting, Joel Rubin, who's our legislative representative in Washington, D.C., will be here. He's here visiting his clients throughout Oregon and Washington, and he'll come and present a federal affairs update at the board meeting. So he'll be able to give us the latest news based on what is happening in D.C. with the transportation bill, because the MAP 21 expires September 30th. If you've been following in some of the APTA legislative updates I've been forwarding, Senator Wyden has submitted his proposal for a short-term fix through December 31st, but that is going through the process now. The House hasn't received it very warmly, but it is out there. So it will get, and if you watch in the papers and e-zines, it's becoming a hot topic. The Secretary and the Department of Transportation are trying to make it abundantly clear that if something doesn't happen, the country's in tough shape from an infrastructure point of view, especially as we're right now in construction season, especially for highways. So we're hoping for at least a short-term solution to allow us to continue those conversations. And one last item to report. It gives me great pleasure to let you know that your clerk of the board, Linda Galeazzi, is now a certified municipal clerk. She completed her 3-year training program a couple weeks ago at her annual training session up in Washington State, and she's completed all of that, and so we're pretty excited for her to earn that designation. That concludes my report.
Thank you. I hope that when Joel comes to see us next month, that he's going to have some good news on our funding. So, and hopefully he will.
You want to make bets?
No, no money there. Okay, I attended a number of meetings this last month also. We had the third budget committee meeting, and we approved and passed the budget on for tonight's consideration. Went to a chamber forum meeting, which was the business of the year, which was interesting to see all these folks get congratulated for doing good. Attended the chamber policy committee meeting where had a very interesting conversation on medical marijuana outlets. And it was really kind of interesting because, you know, my generation doesn't seem to have the same feeling about marijuana as some of these other generations. It's really kind of interesting. Attended a SEDCOR lunch, and they basically honored several categories of their members for the year. And of course, the work session, open house on the river crossing, and the transportation improvement plan. And the chamber executive breakfast just this week, and they went over about various things that the chamber has done during the year, and they were very proud of that, and rightfully so. And why don't we start with Steve on the other end here?
Mine will be short because of health reasons. The first part of the month I was out a little bit. I did show up for the work session, and then I did make the budget meeting, and I have to share that I will not be here for the next board meeting because it's my daughter's wedding rehearsal.
It's only the rehearsal.
It's,
Where are your
He's the
priorities?
I have to know where I'm going to be when I'm filled with tears and trying to figure out which way the aisle goes. No, it's, yeah, it's in Eugene, so it's going to be hard to, miss that one. And then the work session I'm going to miss because I'll be out of town, so it's like taking a month off and try to make it up. That's about it.
I did most of the same meetings. I went to the SCATs, the aorta, the board functions, and attended 3 neighborhood meetings, and the river crossing, and that pretty much covers it. Quite a few meetings, but they're all.
My wife had a little boy. So now I have a son, and it's been really exciting. The 3 older sisters just love him to death, and it's been really cute to see the 2-year-old become a big sister, and the second, the 5-year-old, who loves all the boy sort of stuff, just be so excited that now she has a little brother. That's going to be her best bud, as she says. So it's been really fun, and I'm really grateful for my amazing wife that can make that happen. Both taking care of 4 kids, so it's a life change for sure. Just that additional number 4, it seems like it's going to require a lot more effort. So I appreciate Alan working with me. He came over to my office and went through the work session material because I had to miss that. So anyway, I really appreciate that. Otherwise, I guess budget committee and yeah.
Yeah. John?
Well, I get to be last, and therefore I get to say me too to most of these things. The 2 things I want to add are in my neighborhood association, NOLA. They're very stimulated because in the transportation improvement plan, Brown Road, which runs right through their neighborhood, is getting curbs and sidewalks all the way on both sides. And they've been eager to see that happen. They have an unimproved park on Brown Road that they're working to improve and bring up to speed. And they are very interested in bus turnouts and bus shelters on Brown Road. And based on the ridership and the number of boardings that we get on Brown Road, they're going to have a real uphill battle to get more bus shelters, but I think one is reasonable. And on the turnouts, I'm going to let staff make a recommendation on that. What do I know? The other topic is that I think it's really great that we've got Courthouse Square operating again. And as it relates to board activity, as I sit there waiting for my rides to come and get me, people find me and pigeonhole me on a variety of issues, so that in future, as we bring topics to the public, I'd say that we need a public outreach office or desk or something right here at Courthouse Square in the customer area. And the other one is that I'm also getting lots of interaction and interest out at the senior centers. That would be another place we might want to take a look at to making some outreach. That's it.
Marcia?
Like everybody else, I did the budget, the work session. We had the area commission and attended the open house on the river crossing and the transportation improvement plan, which was also the same night as the SCAN annual meeting. So it was a busy day for that. I was at a Kiwanis meeting where we had a presentation from Sue Rydell, who's the Director of Youth Safety Programs for the Oregon Department of Transportation Traffic Safety Commission. And that's a very interesting presentation, and if people have the need for a meeting, it's interesting to know all of the different things that go on in trying to encourage 0 to 19 youth in Oregon for safety issues. They have a little tiny bit of state general fund funding, but mostly it's flexible federal funds, so that program might close down if they don't have flexible funds. And the other thing I had since the last meeting was an opportunity to be a rail transit groupie, because Victor and I went to San Francisco. And we were there while there was a sick out, so we had crowded buses. Gray hair helped. People kept on offering me seats. Very crowded buses, but we got our feet underneath us, and we had our little map, as did thousands of other people who were in the city using the buses. And so we did a lot of bus riding, some walking, one cab ride, and then a shared ride to the airport. And we took part from the airport into the city. So we did everything. Well, we had 2 private car rides because our younger siblings, spouses, didn't want us to have to take the bus late at night to go back to the hotel on 2 occasions, so they made arrangements for us to have rides back home. But we were totally transit-oriented in San Francisco, which is a good city to be in. So, a bus person's holiday city.
Sure, all sorts of different kinds of stuff. And Kate?
So, yeah, I did go to the budget meeting. I missed the work session. I was on vacation. I missed a couple of meetings on vacation, which it was great, very fun, and a lot of work. But also, I've been spending a lot of time with the discussions on the Urban Renewal Board about Portland Road, and a lot of the concerns about it not being bike-friendly and ped-friendly and, pedestrian-friendly, and wheelchair-friendly. So there's a lot of issues and concerns there, and we continue to talk with the city. So hopefully, in years to come, that they can get rid of some of the health hazards and other stuff on Portland Road, so people can truly use it, and hopefully it'll be transit-friendly in years to come.
Okay, anyone have anything else? Okay, we're going to go into executive session now. We'll recess the regular meeting and go into executive session. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, let's see something about the banquet.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot that in my report. As a reminder, Saturday evening is the awards and recognition banquet. Should be a fun night. We have a good RSVP crowd and a few surprises along the way.
Yes. Would you mind reading Yeah, I'm going to do that. I just got interrupted. Thank you for the interruption. Throwing stuff at us isn't nice, though. Anyway, we're going to into executive session now for the general manager's performance evaluation. The board will meet in executive session to evaluate the performance of an officer, employee, or staff member if that person does not request an open meeting pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub I